You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 160. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Are you ready to talk about leadership? What it means to have a leadership mindset and what leadership looks like for you in your practice? If so, you are in the right place. Welcome. I'm so thrilled to have you here and excited to dive into this topic with you. The topic of leadership for women lawyers is one that I've been thinking about for the last several months in particular. The reason is that it is a common and emerging theme within the coaching work that I am doing with women lawyers. What I find in my practice is that women lawyers will often come to me when they are at an inflection point in their career. Now, this will not come as a surprise. I am a coach. This is what I do. I help people with transitions. I help people reach their goals. And so women lawyers will come to me with a decision that they need to make in respect of their career. It could be a job transition. It could be they're changing roles within their firm or their organization. You may be a lawyer who is a senior associate and you are stepping into more of a leadership role at your firm. You may be on the cusp of partnership, or you've been made partner, or you've been partner for a while. And what you're trying to do is really hone your leadership skills. You're trying to see yourself as a leader, embody that role as a leader. You may have been leading for quite some time and you're trying to make your voice heard at the table. There are a number of situations in which leadership may present. It may be that you're very early on in your practice, and what you're doing is making that shift from student mentality to lawyer mentality and all that that involves. And so wherever it is that you are, what I would invite you to think about is the role that leadership plays currently in your life, and what would be different for you if you were to step into this leadership mindset. So what we're going to do today is I am going to explain to you what I mean by leadership mindset, and I would invite you to reflect on how this relates to you in your practice, how you are thinking about these things, and the impact that embracing that mindset will have for you in your practice. Now, once we finish or conclude that part of our discussion today, I'm also going to share a couple of opportunities where you and I can work together and help you become that leader that you want to be. So with that, what I think would be a helpful starting point is to look at what is not a leadership mindset. And I struggled a little bit to think about the best way to describe a mindset that is not leadership. And the closest thing that I could come up with is a student mindset. So we're going to draw a contrast between a student mindset and a leadership mindset. And when I talk about a student mindset, I'm not doing it in a way to be critical of a student mindset. For all of us who have become lawyers, we have had to be reasonably good students. We have had to understand how the system works and check the boxes and do the things required to get to the game in the first place. And there are a number of skills that are really wonderful, productive skills that will help all of us contribute to society as a result of having them. So first of all, I don't mean to disparage a student mindset at all. Second of all, the student mindset isn't one that is unique to students. The student mindset is a way of thinking that I see among lawyers at all stages of practice. You can be a very senior lawyer and still have elements of the student mindset. So the reason I'm going to set it up as student mindset versus leader mindset is to show you the difference. And as I mentioned, it's not a perfect description, but it's the best that I can come up with to illustrate the shifts that I would encourage you to start thinking about if you haven't already, and maybe start implementing more of in your practice. So we're going to start with the student mindset and what that looks like. And I've got 5 different characteristics that I would invite you to consider. Now, the first characteristic, not surprisingly, is this idea of being a good student. And what does it mean to be a good student? Well, usually a good student is a student who gets good grades, right? All that work that you do in elementary school and high school and university, it all boils down to a letter grade. When you applied for your law job, chances are one of the things that they asked you if you went through a recruitment process within the last 20 or some odd years is a copy of your transcripts. So grades matter, and being a good student means getting good grades. It's the A+. What those grades mean is that somebody approved of you, right? And this good student mentality trickles on after the school portion of your life has wrapped up, right? So if you're a parent, maybe you're trying to live up to the standard of a good mom. You are a lawyer, you are trying to live up to the standard of a good lawyer. What it means is that you are able to satisfy the requirements, you're able to take the tests, whatever that looks like, and get the grades. So that is very much in the student mentality, the student mindset. Another characteristic is that there is often associated with this a perfectionist mindset. So if you think about yourself back in grade school, chances are you were able to score perfect grades. If I look back on my spelling tests when I was younger, spelling came easily to me. It's a gift. I feel lucky. I know that not everybody finds it that it comes that naturally to them. But for me, I was able to have perfect grades on spelling tests, for example. And so that became a standard that I really enjoyed. And if I didn't score a perfect test score, then I felt like there was something wrong. Very small example, but you can see how that would then permeate in other areas, right? That you would not just look at your spelling test, but now you're looking at your whole curriculum, and then it's your university career, and then it's your law school career, and you're constantly looking to get that perfect score, right? And so that perfectionism then can become ingrained in how you think. It's very much associated with that all or nothing, black and white thinking. So if you can't do it perfectly, then you don't want to do it at all. It can instill a lot of fear. It can instill procrastination. It can instill this belief that there is a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, and you never want to find yourself in that wrong way. Now, a perfectionistic mindset is also very much associated with a fixed versus a growth mindset. If you're familiar with the work of Carol Dweck, she is an American psychologist who has studied mindset, and she will talk about the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And a growth mindset is one where you feel motivated to take on challenges. When you are challenged by something, you see it as an opportunity to learn, as an opportunity for your brain to grow stronger, for you to develop your skills, to build your confidence. You see adversity as a good thing. Whereas if you have a fixed mindset, and this is more the perfectionistic mindset, you see a challenge as a sign that you might fail. You see a challenge as a risk that it won't be perfect. And so what you can do with a fixed mindset is shy away from those challenges so that you can keep your perfect track record. And I believe it was Carol Dweck who talked about herself as a student being a strong speller and avoiding spelling bee competitions because she didn't want to put herself in a position where she wouldn't be spelling the words correctly. So you can see in that example how you might shy away from risk because it might interfere with your perfect track record. So that is a second characteristic of this student mindset, is that desire for things to be perfect. Now, a third characteristic is this idea of deferring to authority. When you are a student in a classroom, there is almost always a teacher who stands at the front of the room and is considered to be the authority in the subject that they are teaching about. And what can happen is we can start to take that relationship of deference to the authority, and reenact that in other areas of our life. So you might notice that when you work with certain senior lawyers, that there's a sense of deference to them, that they must know the answer to all of this because they are the authority. And in some cases, that may be true. They may have the answers. And in some cases, they may simply not have the answers. And it was a real eye-opener to me At one point in my career, it was actually relatively late in my career, shortly before I decided to transition out of lawyering and into coaching. And I was speaking with a retired lawyer, a very senior lawyer, and she told me that quite often the more senior lawyers, they themselves do not know the answers. They do not know what is right and what is wrong in terms of what to do on a file. And this really blew my mind because I had always assumed that anybody who had 10 or 15 years under their belt more than me must know everything. They must know what they're doing. And you might be able to relate to this in other areas of your life as well. So, for example, if you're a parent, right? I remember looking at my parents and just assuming that they must know all of the answers. And now that I'm a parent, I realize that, yeah, I have some of the answers. I probably have a lot more answers than my kids at this stage, but I don't have all of the answers. And that's okay. So this idea of being a good student is equating a person with being the authority in whatever it happens to be. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. You can learn from authorities. You can learn from mentors. However, this is a mindset that might have you stuck in a pattern where you're deferring your sense of authority to another person. Now, the fourth characteristic is the idea that there is a formula. There is an answer. When you are a student, whether you're a grade school student or a law student, chances are there's an answer key, right? There's a question, you're being tested on something, and there's a right answer, there's a wrong answer, and there's a formula to figure it out. And one of the biggest transitions that you may have noticed when you went from being a law student in a law school environment to a practicing lawyer, whether you were an articling student just learning the ropes or an actual practicing lawyer, is that the problems that you were given did not have an answer key. There was not some place you could go to test your answer to see whether or not you got it right or wrong. The test was, is this going to work in the real world? And I had a mentor who had this expression. I hesitate to even share it, but I will. And he used to say that 80% in law school is an A. 80% in practice is a call to your insurer. Now, it's a bit harsh and, question whether or not that's always the case. Is it competence? I'm not sure. But that aside, this idea of there being an answer key simply doesn't exist once you're out of a school environment. And so that can mean a lot of things, both in terms of the way you practice, right? Alluding back to what I just mentioned, right? If you're dealing with an actual scenario at work where you're trying to find the answer, and also in the way that you run your career, in the way that you lead yourself, in the way that you make decisions. So there is no one single path for you to follow that is the tried and true. That means you get it right or you get it wrong. And I see this a lot in career progression. For some lawyers, there will be a fairly linear path of law school to student to associate to senior associate to partner to senior partner to whatever happens to follow. Maybe it's a judge. And so there's this linear path and you can see it and it's step by step. But for the majority of lawyers that I speak with, it is not such a linear path. There are multiple spots along the way where you tack and pivot. You think of a sailboat that's going from point A to point B. It's not sailing there in a straight line. It's going in a zigzag. And so 90% of the time, it's not going in the right direction, but you keep making those turns, you keep making those pivots, and ultimately you end up at your destination. So going back to the student mentality, the student mindset, the student believes that there's a formula that you need to follow. And when you follow that formula, you get to the end and you get your reward. And that is a mindset that will keep you in a student pattern. And so the last characteristic that I would like to highlight when it comes to a student mindset is that of being reactive or responsive. Now, the idea here is that for a student, the student will take the initiative to sign up for a program. But ultimately, the program is governed by somebody else. The curriculum is set by the teacher. The semester system is set by the school. The method of evaluation is set by the teacher and the institution. And so somebody else is telling you what you need to do, when you need to do it by, and what the criteria are for success. That is a student mindset. And in a minute, I'm going to contrast that with a leadership mindset. But you can see where I'm going with this. So, and to summarize the student mindset, we've got this good student. We're looking for the A+. We may have perfectionistic tendencies. We want it to be 100% or not at all. We have this sense of deference to authority, that there is somebody else out there who knows better than we do. They know everything potentially. There's the idea that there's a formula for success, right? You just have to figure out what it is. You plug it in. It's like a recipe to bake a cake. You just add the ingredients and there you go. And it's reactive, right? The idea is that somebody else has created the infrastructure for you and you just need to follow the steps. Now, on the one hand, this can generate a number of really great feelings, right? You've been a good student. You know what this is all about. You can feel really proud, right? When you write that test and you get that 100% score where you meet all the standards, where you get the A+, where you have the approval, you can feel that sense of security, right? That you know that you have followed all of the rules, you have ticked all of the boxes, you can feel like there's somebody else out there that knows the path, right? You might question your own judgment when it comes to making a decision on a file or making a career decision, but there's someone else out there that you can always go speak to and they can tell you whether or not you've made the right answer. And in some ways, it can be comforting to be in a reactive mode, right? A responsive mode. When you're not the one who's required to make the decisions, when you're not required to set the tone, then you're taking the inputs and you're managing them. And chances are you're really good at managing those different inputs to meet the deadlines, to do the things that you need to do. But it is a different skill set from the leadership mindset. Now, the student mindset can also create a number of feelings that are not quite as positive. When you get hooked on that feeling of approval and certainty, you can start to feel really uncomfortable in situations where you don't have that approval, where you don't get that A+. And you might work really, really, really hard either to get that A+, again, that perfectionistic way of working and overworking to get that perfect answer, to be that perfect lawyer, to be that perfect person, that perfect mother. So you're working so hard to be perfect, which can lead to exhaustion. You may experience a lot of self-doubt. If you're outsourcing your authority to somebody else, you might start to question your own ability to make decisions, your own ability to come up with the answers. If you are constantly looking for the answer, if the pathway is already out there, the formula is already out there, you might find that you spend a lot of time looking for that formula. And you might think you find a formula and you might even test that formula. But if that formula doesn't get you to where you want to be, then you might start thinking that this is a reflection of you not being able to follow it well enough, or maybe you haven't found the right formula. And what you might also find is that you fear these feelings of uncertainty, right? If there's not a certain outcome, you might really fear what that feels like. You might find it's really difficult for you to make decisions. You might find it's really difficult for you to take risks. And then you might start to notice that you're waiting for permission, right? You want to make a decision, but you don't want to make that decision on your own. So you're waiting for somebody else to tell you that it's okay to do that. You might feel indecisive, stuck, paralyzed because you're fearful of moving forward and doing it wrong. You might find that you have a lot of internal negative self-talk. This is something that I see so often and it breaks my heart. And I would love to enter everybody's brain and do something about this. And so I'm trying to do that right now. This internal negative self-talk, when we've got this perfectionistic way of thinking and we think that we need to be the perfect student, and if we somehow don't get it right, it's a reflection on us, it can lead to this really negative discussion or internal narrative. That can be really limiting. You might find that you then end up in this cycle of deference, right? Where you're looking for somebody else to tell you what to do. And what you might find is that you continue to play smaller. You don't want to be seen as making a mistake. You don't want to make the mistake. And that reinforces itself. And so you find that you actually start to lose your sense of confidence because you're playing small, trying to avoid judgment, trying to avoid risk-taking, trying to avoid failure. And then what you might notice is that you end up stuck, right? You might be stuck at a career plateau where you do a good job. You are a competent and good worker. People know they can count on you to get things done. However, what you've noticed is that there are people around you who are moving ahead of you, people who maybe aren't as smart as you, who don't have as high test scores as you, but somehow they're moving forward and you are not. And this can be a reflection of having this student mentality and not moving past it. So if those are the elements of a student mindset, then what does it look like to adopt a leadership mindset? Well, looking at these same 5 criteria, you can imagine it's basically taking the student mindset and then looking at it another way. So if we go back to that good student perspective, that A+, getting things right, doing the right tests and scoring 100%, what would be the difference here? Well, a leader mindset is moving away from that A+ external approval measure and instead looking at the purpose. Now, if you're anything like me, you have probably studied for countless exams where you stayed up as late as you had to, you ingested all of the information, and the next day you showed up and you wrote an exam and you wrote a solid exam, a 90 plus, 100%, whatever it was, you wrote a really good exam. But if someone were to ask you 2 weeks later what it was that you wrote about in that exam, you would have a very hard time figuring out what the answer was, let alone how you would apply it in the real world. I had this experience with a sailing course that I took. It was really interesting. There was a 2-part sailing course. One of the components was a written exam. The other component was more of a practical in the boat, wind blowing, doing your sails, all of that. The written exam portion was easy to me. I could easily go home and memorize all the different parts of a sailboat, the tides, the winds, what different definitions meant, and write that exam with confidence and certainty. And yet, once I was in the sailboat with the wind blowing and, this boom in front of me and all these different ropes and the water and the cold and everything, it wasn't as easy. And you may find this as well, that there are certain things where on paper, it's very easy. You may even feel like that as I'm thinking about it. I mean, we can feel like that about our lives, right? Our lives look so great on paper. We've got the house, the kids, the job, the car, whatever. And yet when you're living your life, you're like, wait a second, this is actually really hard. This isn't exactly what it looks like on paper. And so that is the difference, right? If you are looking at the writing the perfect exam, what that student mentality looks like versus the leader mentality, the leader isn't as concerned about the score. The leader isn't concerned about the A+. The leader is more concerned with the purpose. So when you're going to learn how to sail or you're writing the exam, the focus isn't so much on, are we getting the A, but the focus is on, how does this matter? What am I really trying to do here? What are my priorities? What is the impact that I'm trying to make? So the questions are a little bit different. And another way that this purpose shows up, or the leader mindset shows up in the work that I do with lawyers, is sometimes I'll be working with a lawyer. They're in their job and they like their job, but they're not really sure if it's their be-all, end-all job. And we'll get into the specifics of what it is that they want to create in their professional life. Things that they want to do, goals that they have in terms of the skills they're looking to develop, the networks they're trying to build, their long-term goals. And I'll often invite them to think about themselves as being on parallel tracks, right? For many of the components of what they're working on, there will be alignment between their personal goals and the goals of the organization that they're working in. Those are the goals that fall on this parallel track. So you can be thinking about your long-term options after a few months or years, what options might open up to you. And for a period of time, you don't have to do anything differently, right? You're on those parallel tracks. And where you start to veer off of those parallel tracks, that's when you start to say, okay, the place that I'm in right now isn't providing me with the opportunities that I want. How am I going to create that new opportunity? And that's kind of when you go off the parallel. So the idea here is that when you're thinking about your own career development, when you're thinking about your purpose may be aligned with the organization that you're with. It may not be aligned. And the leader is able to identify what is important to her and then find a way to pursue those things. So instead of looking for the A, you're looking for the purpose. What is your goal? What is your vision? And how are you going to go about creating those opportunities? Now, the second characteristic was this perfectionistic mindset. So you will not be surprised to hear that another element of a leader mindset is a pragmatist approach, a pragmatist mindset. So whereas the perfectionist is looking to do the perfect thing, the pragmatist is looking at the big picture and moving forward. So we're going to let go of that black and white thinking. We're going to let go of the idea that there is a right decision and a wrong decision. Just like we talked about the fixed mindset, we're now embracing that growth mindset. Instead of viewing a challenge or adversity as a problem, we're now looking at that as an opportunity. What are we here to learn? How are we going to grow from it? And because we've got this different mindset, we're much more willing to step into the arena and fight the battle. So instead of that perfectionistic, I don't want to do it because I don't want to fail or be seen to fail, the pragmatist says it's okay. I am ready. I'm willing to fail because to me, it's worth it. I'm going to learn. I'm going to figure it out. And so I'm just going to make that bold move, even if it means it's not going to be 100%. Now, the third mindset characteristic is this idea of authority. So instead of deferring to the authority of others, a leader is willing to assume her own authority. You are willing to make decisions. You are willing to acknowledge that, yes, you are an authority. You may be a subject matter authority. You are certainly the authority in your own life. You know your strengths. You know what you like. You know what needs to be done for you to feel fulfilled. And so instead of deferring to others, instead of assuming that somebody else knows the path that we are intended to follow in order to have that fulfilling career, we take back that authority. The fourth characteristic is instead of looking for a pathway, instead of looking for somebody else's formula, a leader is willing to create the solution. The leader is willing to try new things. The leader is willing to put their neck on the line and say, you know what, I'm going to try this. I haven't seen it done before, but I have confidence that I can make this work. So instead of looking for the formula, they look within and they are willing to develop a theory and take the steps that align with that theory and move the needle forward, even if they're not guaranteed success. What they are guaranteed is that when they do those things, they will learn, they will move the project forward. And then finally, the difference between a student mindset and a leader mindset is this idea of being proactive. And this aligns perfectly with the idea of leadership as going first. When you are a leader, one of the things that you do is you go before everybody else. And so that means that you are going to be the one to come up with the idea. You are going to be the one to take the first step. You will set the agenda. Now, again, this carries risk with it. Because unlike the student mindset where someone else gives you the assignment, somebody else tells you what you need to learn for the test, you're coming up with this on your own and you're executing on your own. So the potential for reward is high, but so is the risk of failure. And so this is something as a leader that you are stepping into, something that you are willing to embrace and embody, because leading, stepping out means that you are stepping out in a direction that matters to you. Again, going back to that purpose, something that you may be the only authority. You are the person who's figuring this out. You're the person who's willing to take that risk, and you are going to create a huge impact by doing this work as a leader. So what does it feel like to be a leader? Well, on the one hand, there's lots of really great feelings that come along with being a leader, right? There's this model of confidence I've mentioned on the podcast before. It's developed by Dan Sullivan, who is a coach here in Canada. And he talks about the 4 C's of confidence. And it starts with commitment. So your commitment to a goal. From there, you move into courage. That is having the courage to make the first move, difficult as that may be. Once you start practicing, you develop competence. So the closer you get to your goal, the more competent you start to feel. And then finally, you reach courage. And confidence is the byproduct of those earlier steps. So that is how you get to that point of confidence. And that is what you build when you step into leadership. You might feel decisive as you embrace your strengths, as you embrace your authority. You might feel decisive. You might feel that sense of certainty that you are going to build this thing, this career, this practice. You might feel this sense of empowerment, of passion, of excitement. There's a whole lot of really wonderful things that you might feel when you step into this role as leader. Now, On the flip side, it's not all going to be sunshine and rainbows and unicorns. In fact, when you step into leadership, you may find that it's more uncomfortable than going about your work with the student mindset. Remember, when you had that student mindset, there was a safety net. There was somebody else who was an authority. Someone else was in charge. There was a right answer and a wrong answer. And when you step into leadership, all of that goes out the window. You are the person taking the risk. You are working in a system where there may be no rules yet. You may be the trailblazer. So sometimes we think, well, leaders, they are confident, they're fearless, they do this work and it's effortless for them. And I'm here to tell you that no, it is not easy. It is not effortless. Stepping into leadership is challenging. And I'm also inviting you to be willing to accept that challenge as part of your mission as a leader. Now, what happens when you step into leadership, when you're prepared to feel both the good and the bad? What that means is that you're then driven to innovate. You are motivated to blaze a new trail. You might see that the way that things are being run in your organization, they're great, and you see room to do things differently in a way that only you can create. You then feel inspired to move into action. You will start building. You will start asking for what you need. You will start taking risks. And what you'll develop over time is your practice will start to align more and more with your purpose, more and more with your vision. And you'll find the percentage of the work that you're doing, it feels more fulfilling. It feels more interesting to you. It feels more engaging. And you are the one who has created that. So again, just going back to these different criteria, when you adopt a leader's mindset, you're creating the vision, you're basing it on what has meaning to you, you're living in alignment with your purpose, you are adopting a pragmatic approach, you're not looking for perfect, you're looking to get things done, you're looking for forward movement, you are willing to be the authority in your own life. You are willing to ruffle feathers. You are willing to build a team and enlist their help to support you. You are willing to invent a solution. You don't need to follow a path that's already been set for you. You're willing to try something new, something different. And finally, you're willing to go first, right? You are willing to be proactive and set the stage for what comes next. Now, when you make this shift, what you are doing is you are really making a deep, deep shift that goes to the core of who you are as a human. You may have heard me talk on the podcast before about the be, do, have model. It's one that I learned when I was doing my coach training, and it goes something like this. Typically, when we think about our goals and becoming or being a certain way, we look at it from the perspective of having to do the thing first, so that you can have a result. And when you have the result, you can be the person. So here, you might think that there are a number of things that you need to do in order to have maybe a title, in order for you to then own your role or position as a leader. And what I would invite you to consider here with the be, do, have model is for you to start first by being a leader. That means taking that leader mindset and adopting it into your life, practicing that mindset shift already before you have a title that reflects it. That means that when you think of yourself as a leader, what is it that you do differently? So you're now doing things in alignment with that way that you see a leader being. And as a result, you will then have the result that you're looking for. You will have the practice that you so strongly wish to create. You will have the title that you are working toward. Now, it is much easier said than done. What can often happen when you go to make that shift from where you are now into that leadership role? 3 challenges come to mind. Number 1 is this idea of reaching an upper limit. Gay Hendricks talks about this in The Big Leap. It's the idea that we each have a set point, a particular level of success that we are used to, or a level of leadership that we are used to. So if you think of yourself now as being on a spectrum of leadership, where 0 is not a leader at all, maybe you're fully in that student mindset, versus at the other end of a spectrum, which may be a 10, that is full leadership, you are running the show, you're probably somewhere in between. And what can be challenging is that you may have a sense of where you belong, right? You may see yourself as a 3. And so anytime you push past a 3, even if it's to a 4 or a 5, you might start to feel uncomfortable and you will unconsciously push yourself back to your set point. So what that can mean is you might reach that level 5 leadership, feel really uncomfortable, and then self-sabotage to bring yourself back down to a 3. That's one challenge that you might face. Another challenge is resistance. So remember, when we talked about being a leader, doing things first, getting out there, experimenting, failing, what might happen is you'll start to have all these obstacles come up, all these challenges, resistance maybe from yourself. You might get resistance from others who don't really like the direction that you're going in. It might be a threat to them. It might mean that you're not occupying a role that is familiar for them, one that they have gotten used to. And so you might see that there's resistance here. And it can be tempting to see that resistance as a sign to back down. And you might also see that resistance as an opportunity for growth. That resistance, those obstacles, that may be your blueprint for what you need to do to become the leader that you need to be to have the vision that you want to create. Now, a third area where you might experience discomfort is this idea of an identity shift. So if you're used to seeing yourself as someone who goes with the flow, someone who's a reliable team player, and you're wanting to step into leadership, you might have to shatter the existing self-concept that you currently have, your identity, and create a whole new identity. And as I mentioned a moment ago, others may not like it. That new identity may not jive with what they want for themselves, and ultimately the role that they see you playing within that plan that they have. So they may not like it and you might not like it, right? You might not initially feel comfortable when you're calling the shots, when you are assuming leadership, when you are taking risks. Now, these are things that are not necessarily barriers to you becoming a leader, but these are some of the challenges and obstacles that you can anticipate when you start to do this work. We can adopt the leader's mindset. We can try to implement this be, do, have model. And what I'm inviting you to consider is that it may not be this smooth, easy road that you anticipate, that there are going to be challenges and that is okay. One of the reasons why you may want to pursue this, even though it may be challenging, is for what you get on the other side. There is a sense of freedom that comes from being able to have a vision and trust yourself and be a leader and work toward that vision. When you create that vision, when you create that practice that you love, when you're doing the work that you love, you then have that sense of freedom of being able to have control, being able to have authority in the way that you govern your career. And this applies outside of your career as well. You may also find that there's greater fulfillment when you are going after what matters to you. I mean, for you to go through this exercise of finding out what really matters, of following that purpose, of realizing your vision, this is hard work. And so for you to be able to do this hard work, you have to really love what's on the other side. And when you get to that other side and you're doing that work, then you'll find that sense of fulfillment that you may be missing out on currently. So I can speak for myself. I am not practicing law, so in that way, I might be different from what you're seeking to accomplish. However, I can tell you that building the practice that I am building, my coaching practice, I get to do work that I love, work that is fulfilling, work that I connect with, work that I can see myself doing as long as I'm capable of doing my work, because I truly love it. And that did not come because somebody said, here is some work, come and do it. This came from me creating those opportunities. And so you can do exactly the same thing and you can enjoy that level of fulfillment when you're willing to go through the process of creating that for yourself. Now, if leadership is something that you're interested in developing, again, you may already be in a leadership position and you're wanting to refine your practices. You're wanting to be more intentional about how you show up as a leader. Or you may be in that transitional phase where you don't quite yet feel like you've got your footing as a leader, but you know you want to. There are a couple of ways that you and I can work together to help you along the way. Now, the first is a webinar that I'm offering. It'll be a webinar training on June 14th. It's a Friday. It'll take place at noon Pacific time. It's free. You can sign up for it by registering on Zoom. The link will be on along with the show notes that go with this episode. You can also send me an email and I'll send you the link, or message me on LinkedIn. I'll send you the link so you can register. You can come to that training. If you're not available on Friday at noon Pacific time, no problem. I'll be recording the session and I will send you a link to the recording. So in that training, I'm going to dive into leadership for women lawyers and help you to get started on that path. We're going to go deeper than today's podcast episode. We're going to do it more in a workshop style to help you really gain traction and momentum toward you building out yourself as a leader. Now, the second way that we can work together is a bit more involved. As you may know, I have been running group programs for women lawyers for the past year and a half, and I'm going to be offering a group program starting in July. It will be similar to previous iterations of the program, but this time around, we're really focusing in on leadership. I've noticed as an emerging theme, leadership among these groups of women. And so I would love to dial that up and make that one of the focal points, the work that we do together, so that when you go into the program, you are already thinking of yourself as growing your leadership skills. And then the curriculum, as it advances each month, you will continue to refine those leadership skills. So the themes that we'll be covering within that 6-month program together, we're going to start by setting a goal. So you can set a goal that aligns with your leadership goals, something that will challenge you, something that will require you to step out of your comfort zone and into that leadership role. We will then spend a month on your self-concept. So we'll get really clear about where it is that you are and who you must become to achieve your goal, how you need to see yourself. From there, we're going to move into obstacles. That will be the third theme. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the obstacles will come up. When you set a big goal, the obstacles will reveal themselves and those become your roadmap. Those become your blueprint. When you find a way through those obstacles on the other side, you will have developed those leadership skills, those resiliency skills. You will have overcome those obstacles and hate to be spoiler alert, but there will be new obstacles. Don't worry. We've always got a fresh curriculum waiting for us on the other side. But the work that we do together will get you past those obstacles that you identify. Then we spend a month on confidence, authority, and power. And just saying those words excites me. It's probably my favorite month because that's where I see so much room for growth. That's where I see this gap between how we're thinking about ourselves and the actions that we're taking because of the way that we see ourselves. And when we are able to embrace our confidence, to step into authority, to assume power, there's such a shift in terms of what we're willing and able to do within our practice. From there, we move into boundaries, and that is all about creating the protection for your vision, for your dreams, for your goals, and being able to implement that in a practical way. And then finally, sustainable growth. And sustainable growth, I realize sounds a little bit boring, but it isn't, because sustainable growth is actually where we get to deal with what it looks like to grow in a way that is incremental. And by incremental, I don't mean small. I mean building upon what you've already built. So the thing that comes to my mind's eye is a series of steps, like a staircase. And going back to that set point idea, right? When you're not prepared for the set point, for the discomfort that you're going to feel when you step into that leadership role, you might then self-sabotage and stay stuck. Versus sustainable growth, where what we're doing is we're helping you to reach that next level of leadership. And then that becomes the starting point for the next iteration. This really is a lifelong practice. You will increase your leadership skills as you evolve. We will do 6 months of it together, and then you will continue to move on and move forward. And so this skill of being able to grow sustainably, so in a way that doesn't create burnout, and also in a way that allows you to continue to build on your skills, that is what I mean by sustainable growth. Now, in addition to those 6 themes that we talk about, we also have dedicated classes. So a class for time management. This is a very popular topic among my coaching clients, and transitions, which will align beautifully with this notion of leadership, because chances are you will be transitioning in some fashion in your practice, whether it's one of those transitions that is objectively obvious, you're going from job A to job B, or if it's a transition that is more of an internal one. You may stay in the same role, things will look the same from the outside, but you are different. So if you're interested in that program, I'll be talking about it during the webinar. You're also welcome to go to the course webpage. It is available, again, with the recording of this podcast episode. And also, if you cannot find it, no problem, send me an email and I can send you the information. So with that, my dear friend, I am so excited for what is in store for you. I'm so thrilled that you joined me for this episode so that we could have this chat about leadership mindset. Again, I don't want to say that there is anything wrong with a student mindset. It is a very helpful mindset to help you to get to where you are. In other areas of your life, you may be a student. You may need these skills to help you create results, to receive new certifications or whatever it happens to be. But there's also this other option available to you, this leader's mindset. And that is where I'm inviting you to focus, because I know that for each of you, there is something that is waiting for you. There is an idea that is percolating in your mind's eye. And now is the time for you to start to develop those skills that you need to bring that idea to life. So with that, my dear, dear friend, it has been such a pleasure having you. I hope to see you on June 14th. Any questions, send me a note. I look forward to connecting with you then, and I look forward to connecting with you again next week. So thank you again. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.